It's not fair that there are so many women who are absolutely terrified of the court system, having heard the horror stories where they've stopped contact and their children have been whisked away without looking into real allegations of abuse. And this makes people run from the family justice system when they need the family justice system to do what it can do really well, which is put orders in place to protect the children, to protect the mother from the ongoing domestic abuse. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Survivor Diaries. This episode is focusing on an allegation that's often made. So I'm not so much talking about the law at this stage as the allegations that I see as a legal professional. And I'm thinking in the timescale that I've been with my current firm, which is 7 years this year. And so always working in the family department, what kind of cases using the term parental alienation syndrome have I seen? And what I want to do is just give you an idea of the types of cases, the circumstances of those types of cases that can be put into what I think is 3 main categories. Obviously, if anybody watching this film has any other suggestions as to the categories, please do let me have them. 3 main categories, that's what I want to go through in this episode. And I'm doing this with a focus on what, in my ideal, what the court would see and what the court would understand so that it can promote good practice and the consistent application of good practice in the family courts. And as well, I'm speaking, because I'm also a court user, a mother who is again facing the family court system. This is something that I am experiencing and something that I know a lot of other mothers are experiencing as well. And it's an allegation that's very, very frequently made. Just looking at what parental alienation is. Parental alienation is where a child is manipulated or coerced into rejecting on different levels, sometimes clearly rejecting, sometimes just emotionally rejecting another parent. And the suggestion by the parental alienation is that it is done by a parent towards the other co-parent. Does that ever happen? Have I ever seen that happen? Yes, I have seen that happen, and probably in the 7 years that I've worked at the firm where I work, I've seen it maybe 3 times at push. And there's a reason for this, and this is because after 2 people have separated, it's an emotionally traumatic time. This is what we'd see as family lawyers. We see people absolutely in pieces because for a lot of people, if their family is breaking down, then it impacts on all areas of their life. It's a terrible thing to be experiencing. And people coming out of those relationships feeling very raw, as I've mentioned, feeling very hurt, and sometimes the conflict or the pain carries on between the adult parties, between the co-parents, and either parent may start to withhold the contact with the other parent or undermine the other parent. For example, if they know that the bedtime is 7 o'clock, then they're going to let them stay up a little bit extra at the other parent just to undermine that kind of alienation. And that doesn't happen very often because as the child arrangements procedure progresses, when these co-parents have not been able to agree something, then usually the parents will start to understand that they need to be working together. This is the message from the courts. The courts, of course, approaching this with a presumption in Section 1(2)(a) of the Children Act, and a presumption that the involvement of both parents in a child's life is going to be of benefit to that child as much as is practical and safe for there to be. This tends to get resolved during the child arrangements procedure, and I've seen people very raw on separation, and within a few months their approach to the relationship is very different, and they don't want to continue the legal battle because they're generally non-abusive people, just a little bit upset about the end of the relationship. It tends to disappear. So this is the least likely allegation of parental alienation. Do I see it? And do I see parents who will not let go of an issue that happened in the marriage, happened in the separation, and they continue it, and they do it. And it's so rare. It really is so rare, with the court system there to help children, to make sure that they know both of the parents, that it's not likely to get to that stage. That's the least common allegation of parental alienation that I see. A second group, which is always very upsetting, is where one parent is abusive and the other parent is not abusive, and between them they have agreed or arranged, worked up to a 50-50 sharing of the children. And at this stage, one of the parents then terribly undermines the other parent. And I'll come back to this in a second, but the effect is that this parent that is also undermining will be putting a lot of emphasis on the child's wishes and feelings. So this parent will be encouraging them to have their own thoughts and ideas about things, whether it's what they want to do today or whether it's, which parent they want to live with. And the problem is that that's not a good place to put a child. You don't want to put a child in the middle of a situation of two parents having to decide which parent they live with. That's emotionally traumatic to children. So there's two things in this second category that I've mentioned which are important. I've mentioned that one of the parents is abusive and that there is a harm towards the child that is happening here. Unfortunately, the cases, maybe 5, 6, possibly 7 that I've met within the 7 years that I've been working with my current firm, have been mothers who have allowed themselves to get into a 50-50 relationship with the abuser, the abusive father, who has then been completely inconsistent with routines for the child. Let's come back to that and what that looks like, what I'm saying there about routines. We all understand that it's important for a child to have routines. And I'm going to again borrow from Pat Craven, Living with the Dominator. And I'm just going to read a paragraph from her book. So this is in the example of a 6-year-old, and it's about routines and why they're important. Security is also an emotional requirement. Our child needs to know that its world is a safe, predictable place. We give it this security with routine. Our child needs to know when it's time for school or bed, and to know where it lives. To provide this kind of security, our child needs the powerful adults in its life to be consistent. This will ensure that the rules are consistent. If something they do is acceptable today, it must be acceptable tomorrow. If one of their actions is wrong today, it must also be wrong tomorrow. So it has a massive psychological impact, the importance of routines with children of all ages. In this second example that I'm talking about, one parent, and I'm being gender specific now, I'm disclaiming again, I know that it doesn't always have to be this way round. I'm talking about a patriarchal society and its previous treatment of women, and that's why I'm going to fall into the gender specific. This is the mother who's come into this 50-50 arrangement, probably been pushed quite a lot from the father to agree more and more time with the children. There may have been previous court proceedings achieving a 50-50 sharing of time. The difficulty with that is that the 50-50 sharing of time requires excellent communication between the co-parents, and there cannot be excellent communication between the co-parents if there has been abuse in the relationship. Pat Craven has described in those paragraphs the requirement for a child to feel safe and secure because those routines are around them. That turns them into secure individuals. And so imagine that is not there, and imagine that one parent is deliberately changing the routines because that parent, the bad father, does not have the children's interests at heart. So the court should be seeing that there's something wrong with the co-parenting relationship where one parent is clearly doing their own thing during that contact, which they have probably quite a substantial amount of, not working with the other co-parent, and I need the court to see that that's harmful, that the absence of routine is harmful. The abusive parent, who is letting the children stay up as long as they like, giving ice cream for breakfast, and there's a puppy, I've mentioned before, there's a pony. So there's all these excellent things that happen at the abusive parent's house. The abusive parent is spoiling the children. Remember that the abusive parent is not acting in the best interests of the child. They are manipulating people so that they can get them to do what they want. And in this case, the abusive parent is manipulating the children by spoiling them and countering every single routine that the mother is trying to impose. Of course, the children, as they then get older, the idea will start to be floated by the father that the children have been saying that they want to spend more time with him. Of course, we know this is because they get ice cream for breakfast, they don't have to do homework, and they get to stay up till all hours. They can, you see the problem, and it's not okay for the courts just to say, well, there's different parenting styles, because this is an abusive parenting style, an abusive co-parenting relationship, and it's not okay. The court needs to see this for what it is. As the children get older and their wishes and feelings become more relevant, the court is, of course, starting to consider their wishes and feelings. The older the child is, the more likely they are to take those wishes and feelings on board. It's always in the light of their understanding, so you can't expect young children to know what domestic abuse is, but you can expect young children to like having ice cream for breakfast at daddy's. And you need to see the undermining, that's terrible undermining that goes on here. And this is how abusive fathers obtain the ultimate wish, which is to completely destroy the mother's relationship with the children. And that is a pattern of an abusive father. Remember that the father is a liar, he is a persuader, he is a head worker. The children will be picking up his language about their mother. They will be starting to feel conflicted about that. They may even be calling their mother the same names that the father does, or calling other children at school the same names that the father calls the mother. What they are having is a corrosive undermining of the relationship with the mother. And it's so sad. And this happens, and this is the second most predominant kind of parental alienation allegation that I see happening in my work in family law. In these cases where the father is completely undermining the mother, the father will, in these applications coming into court, place huge weight on the wishes and feelings of the child. You will see in these kind of applications as they come into court that the father is saying that a child that may be a little young to be experiencing the trauma of saying that they don't want to live with a parent, and then the mixed feelings that they're going to feel about that. They're going to feel upset about that. They're going to feel worried about the other parent and confused because the co-parenting relationship is not mutually supportive. If the courts can look out for this overweighted opinion of what should happen with the wishes and feelings of the child from the father, this is an indication that the father has been pandering to the wishes and feelings of the child to help to build weight in his case against the mother. The parents don't want to live with you. Well, yes, we don't have ice cream for breakfast here. And that's really unfortunate, and that shouldn't happen. And I want the courts to look out for this enhanced weight from the father on the wishes and feelings of the child as a danger signal in those kind of applications. The most common, the most predominant allegation of parental alienation syndrome that I see is usually hand in hand with an application from an abusive father. And in this situation, the allegation is made in the application form that, and it's usually accompanied by C1A. This is one of the indicators that the court could look for. So form C1A is coming in and it's ticked that the children are being emotionally abused because they are not allowed to have a relationship with their father. And this is obviously relying on the presumption that section 1(2)(a) of the Children Act. But the difficulty here is that often, just digging a little bit deeper into this father's application, you find that maybe this can be picked up by the response from the mother on forms C7 and C1A of her own, which comes in at this time. suggest, and there's a good reason. There's a good reason why the contact stopped. It could even be that this father has stopped his own contact. And then remember that the abusive personality is a liar. So the liar will then say that the contact was stopped by the mother, when in actual fact it wasn't. It's common, I've seen, for fathers to leave at the end of the relationship and not see the children. And what they are hoping will happen in that example is that the children will miss them and put pressure on the mum. This is the persuader at work, and the persuader cries in front of the children, says that he's poorly because he can't see the children, and the children are saying things like, "Why can't Daddy come back? Can Daddy come back? He's crying, he's upset, it's making him poorly, he's very sorry." This is all the persuader, and a bit of the head work as well coming in. And what's happened here usually is that the father has removed himself from the situation for a period of time. What has not happened as planned is that the children did not clamour too much at mother, or enough at mother, for her to get in touch and say, "Right, you need to come home, the kids are missing you." And I think that that's a lot more common than you might expect. Remember, I'm thinking about applications that I've seen over the last 7 years. I'm only a very baby lawyer. I've not been qualified very long, but I've had experience of child arrangements for a very long time now. This application is coming in and it's making allegations of parental alienation. This cruel mother is hindering the relationship between the father and the children, and they heavily rely on section 1 subsection 2a, and there's an over-reliance on the fact that a child has a right to know both parents. And I see this in the application. It's coming up in the application, in the brief statement that is made in the C100, that the father doesn't mention the fact that they stopped their own contact. And when I speak with the mother, they show me the text where, they said that, "Oh, well, that's it then, I'm not going to see you or the kids." And they had this expectation that this would be so upsetting to the children that the children would then pressure the mother into getting back in touch with the father, even if there's been violence or something similar. And it's something that is vital that the courts must see, because again, it's the abusive personality undermining the mother, blaming the mother. And this is very significant, because the court proceedings are often used to batter mothers of children by abusive fathers in the court system. And this is why I needed to be consistent. It's not fair that there are so many women who are absolutely terrified of the court system, having heard the horror stories where they've stopped contact and their children have been whisked away, without looking into real allegations of abuse. And this makes people run from the family justice system when they need the family justice system to do what it can do really well, which is put orders in place to protect the children, to protect the mother from the ongoing domestic abuse. And this is why it's vital that this is understood. You can just see it from the application process. So at this stage, there's an allegation that the mother is causing harm to the children by not letting them see their dad. And this immediately makes me anxious. I start to think that because of this allegation here, the mother must have had some reason to stop contact. Remember, in the past I've said about parenting, it doesn't make sense. Any parent, gender neutral, any parent having children 24/7 will at some point quite quickly realise, hang on, I would like to be co-parenting cooperatively with somebody so that the children can be entertained, happy, loved, cared for, encouraged, supported, just so I can have a rest. Now, I know my daughter won't mind me saying this, and she knows that she's the most important thing to me and I love her to bits. Yet, as a mother, I'm saying I have needed a rest in the past. And so that's why it doesn't make sense, this allegation coming from the father. It's mother blaming, and there is a book, it's quite a few years old now, called Mothering Through Domestic Violence, which is by Lorraine Radford and Marianne Hester. It's a very, very good book if you are a mother and you want to look at the difficulties or the aspect of mother blaming through the courts. And there is actually a chapter in that book, chapter 7, just called Mother Blaming in the Courts. We'll flash up a picture of this book on the screen now. I hope they won't mind. So why do the fathers in this situation make this application when they've already stopped contact? Well, first of all, they're going to lie. They're going to say that they haven't stopped contact, or, if they hadn't seen the children for 6 weeks, the second that they say, no, I shall have contact now, and the mother says, actually, I don't think that's a good idea because you're not being consistent. It's not the consistent application of routines. You might disappear for another 6 weeks, and the child's not been able to form a bond with you while you've been away. So, not really. And then as soon as the mother says, no, I'm not immediately agreeing to the contact restarting, which is the abuser trying to re-establish the rules of the game here, then that's when the allegation is made. You are preventing me from having a relationship with my child. How dare you, you horrible, horrible person. And this is the allegation coming through in the application. This father wants to take the mother to court so that she can get told by a judge imposing an order. And in their mind, it's probably a male judge telling the little woman what they need to do. And with that order, they will then batter the mother with that. And so as soon as they come out of court, for example, they may say, right, you drop the child off then on these days. And if the mother can't afford to do it and was hoping that, they were going to be able to share this kind of responsibility, then if she cannot do it, physically cannot do it, he will then say, you are in breach of the order. You are breaking the law. And really horrible things that, let's face it, a mother who is trying to be a mother to the children doesn't need. They don't need the court to be looking at her as if to say, why aren't you letting this father have contact with this child? They need a court who are concerned immediately about her allegations of domestic abuse. Because I keep saying this over and over again, and I will keep saying it, women, the allegation of parental alienation just does not make sense. Okay, it does happen sometimes, but in the majority of times I see the allegation being made. 50% of the cases that I've seen has got this counter allegation saying, oh well, the mother is abusive because she's harming the children by not letting me have contact. I want to finish just briefly on why the abusive father does this, why they make this application and this allegation of parental alienation. So this is because they lie. Remember that they are the liar, and imagine that they are with family or with friends or even with older children, and they have to explain why they are not seeing their child. There may be already findings made of harm. They may not be progressing on a domestic violence perpetrator programme, and people are turning around and saying, well, how come you don't see your daughter? How come you don't see your son? And what they're going to do, are they going to say, well, there's a court order that's been put in place because I am more harmful to be in my child's life than I am not to be in the child's life, which of course is also harmful. That's a pretty heavy thing to be acknowledging, and of course the abuser is not acknowledging this yet, so they have to maintain that they have been prevented. The evidence has been contrived and made up, and they were taken by surprise by a nasty judge or a nasty barrister, and the law got it wrong, and eventually people will say to this abusive father, well, if the law got it wrong, make an application. So they will then start repeating these applications over and over again. Again, a form of abuse, dragging the mother to the court to explain again why she is not allowing contact, why she is doing this terribly harmful thing. When of course, if there's domestic abuse, she's doing absolutely the right thing by stopping contact. The final thing that I wanted to mention in this episode was about evidence and proving or disproving the allegation of parental alienation. So in any difficulties with child arrangements, the general advice that is given is always, if you can communicate in writing, switch to communicating in writing, and always keep a record of the communication. There are different ways you can do that. You can keep it in text message, emails. There are some apps like Talking Parents that you can get, and that keeps a record of everything about that conversation, the time that it was read, the time that it was sent, etc. So once you've got your communication in writing, then if you are working with somebody who is genuinely alienating you, you can show in writing that you are requesting contact and it is being dismissed or ignored completely. So you can show potentially a genuine alienation case. If there has been abuse with the co-parent or undermining, you can also show this by keeping an evidence log of the communication. So if you have the communication between you where you are saying, would you mind making sure that they get to bed at sort of 7 o'clock this evening, and you get back a reply such as, they'll go when they want, or nothing to do with you, or something like that, then that again is you collecting evidence to show that you are working with a hostile co-parent who is undermining you. Keep your communication in writing and keep a log as well. Keep a log of any communication, any contact that's happening. Write down if the children have returned from contact, for example, and they are saying unusual things like mummy's taking all of daddy's money or things like that. Just make a note of what was said and who was there. So you may have a friend or a relative with you who also heard the same comment. So you just keep a record of the contact in case you need it for the court process later on. The aim of this episode was to just discuss the allegation of parental alienation syndrome. I believe that there is a further form of abuse, which is parental self-alienation syndrome. And this is when a father will, I briefly outlined it, a father will say, no, I'm not having any contact with the children. We can't do that because you won't drop off, you won't be civil, you won't call off the CSA, many other different reasons that they're trying to use the control. So they stop their own contact. And then a few weeks later, suddenly there's a C100 from nowhere saying, well, I've been prevented. And for a mother who's just bent on bringing up these children and mothering and just managing to get through this parenting thing, this is just a ridiculous stress, a drain of her energy in this situation. So this is the parental self-alienation, which I think is far more common than people think. I'm hoping that this has been useful to anybody experiencing parental alienation in its different forms, or experiencing the allegation of parental alienation, which of course is all I've been talking about in this episode. I'm also hoping that this could be useful to court professionals, to CAFCAS, so that they could also see the different types of parental alienation allegations that are made and what I feel are the most common and what I feel are the very rare ones. I hope that's been useful. Thank you very much for watching the Survivor Diaries, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you and bye. I have no idea which button to press.